Afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. The Small Business Development Center works with entrepreneurs who want to start a business and with owners of existing businesses. We provide no-cost consultations, no cost or low cost training events, and we connect business owners with resources in the community. Today, we're fortunate to have Angela Brewer with the Small Business Administration join us. She's going to talk about Government Contracting 101. We appreciate the partnership we've got with the Small Business Administration. The SBDC has got 21 centers throughout the state of South Carolina. So no matter where you're located in the state, we've got an office close to you. The SBDC is throughout the country. So if you're joining us from another state, there should be an SBDC office in your town or county or state. If you've got questions that go beyond the webinar, we encourage you to contact your local SBDC. Business consultants like myself are trained to work with you on a variety of issues, whether it's cash flow or HR issues, or if you'd like to expand your business, or if you need financing or capital for your business. So please give us a call. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Angela to begin the program.
Thank you so much, Robert.
And Angela, you can share your screen.
Can everyone see my screen?
Not yet.
Give me share.
We gotcha.
How about now?
Looks
okay,
good.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. As he stated, my name is Angela Brewer. I'm a business opportunity specialist with the Small Business Administration, and I'm located here in Columbia, South Carolina. The SBA here serves the entire state, but we also have an area manager that's located in Charleston, and we have a new person that will be in the Spartanburg area starting Monday. But our office, we cover the entire state. We have 9, 10 people in our office now. So if there's ever any need for the SBA, we are still working from home, but we answer our phones through our computers, and we can still email and get phone calls. I've been with SBA now for 4.5, next month will make 5 years interning and working with SBA. I am a 23-year veteran from the Army and Army Reserve. So I came to the SBA with my bright smile and my great enthusiasm that the Army taught me, and my background is HR. So today we're going to be talking about marketing to the federal government, marketing and selling to the federal government. Is your business right for the federal government? How do you determine if your business is right for the federal government? As you all may know, SBA deals with small business. That's our main focus. Our primary focus is on small business, and we deal with size standards. If you all have any questions or any comments or need me to answer anything, please put it in the chat. And I've asked Carolyn she can interrupt during the presentation if you all have any questions. If you have anything that you want to say or ask me as we go through the presentation, please put it in the chat. With SBA, we deal with size standards, or the NAICS code. You might hear me talk about NAICS code a lot, but we deal with the NAICS code or the size standard. And you will be surprised, as a lot of people are, when you're talking about NAICS code, it's not the mom and pop store or the corner store. Sometimes NAICS code could be in the millions of dollars. Take, for instance, the construction 236220. If you're in commercial and industrial build, that NAICS code dollar amount is $39.5 million over the course of 5 years. So that's a lot for a mom and pop store. A lot of mom and pop store would love to make $39.5 million over the course of 5 years. So that's what size standards come into play with small business. And sometimes they deal with the amount of employees, depending on what your NAICS code is, also depends on, will deal with the size, the number of employees that you have. What is your structure? How do you structure your business? Are you a sole proprietor, partnership, corporation? But one thing you must be, you have to be a for-profit business in order to work with the federal government. Everything must be for profit. And you have to have a business, or the primary office have to be located in one of the 50 US states or the 2 contiguous islands that we have here in the United States. The average number of employees, that all depends. We can go into and look at the size when it comes to employees, but mostly it's 50, some is 500, because I know you all probably heard with the PPP. You have to have, right now, if you have 20 or fewer employees, you can apply for the PPP. So it all depends on your NAICS code is what your size is determined. It's not just the corner store anymore. The industry has grown. Do you know your NAICS code? I get that question all the time, because if you're a small business applying for the PPP, you must have a NAICS code. Do you know your NAICS code? Do you know how to determine your NAICS code? SBA have a website. It's called, if you go to every 10 years, the federal government does a census, and that is how you determine your NAICS code. I typically Google, but if you go to, let me see if I can pull it up. Are you all still seeing my slides, my screen? Robert, Carolyn?
Yes, we can see your screen still.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. There it is. This is the website SBA uses to determine what your NAICS code and what is described in your NAICS code, what NAICS code fit into what category. You can also search your NAICS code here. So if you are in the market of say chef, a personal chef, that's the NAICS code. You can do this, or like I said, I Google to determine what NAICS code that, you know, when clients call me, determine NAICS code, I Google, like I talked earlier about, what's here? Someone called me yesterday and they were trying to determine what their NAICS code. This is the website. I will send these websites to Robert and Carolyn. So when they send these slides out, they also give you this website for those who register for today's class, so you can see what NAICS code is best for you, or how to get your NAICS code. Is your business ready? Do you do business with the federal government? Does the government do business with you? We have a website called USA Spending and FPDS, Federal Procurement Data System. If you want to know what the federal government is buying, I recommend or suggest you go to one of those websites or both of those websites. You can go back as far as you want, but I recommend go back for the last 5 years. Once you determine your NAICS code, see if the federal government is buying what you're selling. It'll give you a list of all the servers over since 2017 that they have bought in that NAICS code. And you can determine then if what you do is what the federal government is actually buying. So to determine if the federal government is buying what you're selling or if the federal system is right for you, I would recommend to use those two websites, USA Spending and fpds.gov, and see if the government is buying, because when you're applying for federal government or going for federal contracts, it's not as simple as doing the state and local government contract. The federal business, the opportunities with the federal government is a whole lot more complex than the regular private sector or local government contracts. Research your market. What I just did with USA Spending, and I didn't go to FPDS, but what I just did with USA Spending, it's the same thing. It's like researching your market, trying to find out who's buying what you're selling. You can, with USA Spending, you can actually break it down by agency. So if you know on Fort Jackson or Shaw Air Force Base for those who are in the Columbia area, or Joint Base Charleston for those who are in the Charleston area, if you know who you're trying to market to, you can actually put it in the USA Spending and see what services they have bought over the last 5 years. So, and then, you know, you don't, because everybody don't buy everything. Fort Jackson is a training post. Majority of the contracts we do with Fort Jackson is typically training. Shaw Air Force Base, I think they're doing a lot of buildings or builds right now. So you have to know who's buying what. Are there any questions so far, Carolyn?
Hey,
Give me just
Angela.
one moment. There are a few questions. There are lots of questions about sending out the presentation slides. There is someone that says, let's see, that's the presentation slides. I don't have any immediate questions. No, ma'am.
Okay, Michael, what was that?
Yeah, Angela. Hey, this is Mike Corp. I work with Angela. And I tried to answer a couple of the questions in there, and I'll continue to do so. But, you know, like Angela said, she's going to talk, you know, she's talking about marketing, and that's what it always comes down to. You have to figure out where the opportunities are. One thing I mentioned too, which Angela would probably mention anyways, we have a list of small business representatives at each federal installation, and we'll be glad to send you a copy of that. So that's another way to look for opportunities. You know, personal one-on-one, but you really, when you figure out what your product or service is, that's what you've got to do. What Angela kind of went over briefly, because we could spend, you know, a couple hours just on that. But you have to find out where your market is and where the opportunities are in federal contracting. Yep. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. And for those who are asking, there's a survey that SBDC is requiring you all to do before you get the slides or the presentation. So once you do the presentation, they will be sending the slides out. Oh, I'm sorry. Once you do the survey, they will be sending the slides out to you. So the slides will be available, but that will be once you do the survey.
Thank you, Angela. Yes, it is our hope to give everyone until Monday to respond to the post-event survey. And then those individuals that respond will be receiving the slide presentation as well as a link to the video.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you, ma'am.
And there are a lot of procurement assistance available. You have BOSs or business opportunity specialists. That's what I am. And there are two more located in our office. We have Carl Faison and Stephanie Workman, and also Michael Corp, who is my director. He said we work together, but I work for him every now and then. But we have Mike and Carl used to be contracting officers. So they have a vast knowledge of the contracting programs, and they answer a lot of questions when it comes to contracts, a lot that I'm learning. But here in our office, we have 2 former contracting officers, plus we have 4 BOSs / deputy district director that can assist you when it comes to small business and working with contracts. We work with the agencies around the state often, all the time. We are somewhat on a first name basis with all of them. As Michael stated, we have an agency contact list that I will also send out with Carolyn. So you can only get this information if you do the survey. So there's a lot of great information that you will miss out on if you don't do the survey. We have a PCR. We don't have one in South Carolina. He's located in Georgia, but he covered downs on South Carolina. Sylvia Silva is the PCR for the South Carolina, Georgia region area. We have PTAX, Procurement Technical Assistance Center, Scott Bellows, who you will hear from later on in this presentation. He is one of the PTAX or the PTAC here in South Carolina, and he mostly deals with government federal contract, but he also is a counselor with small business who needs assistance getting registered in our programs. Marketing resources, I need to take Fed Bids opt out. It's no longer Fed Bids opt, it's called beta.sam.gov. And I need to take that out. But that's where you go, anything anytime there's a solicitation over $25,000, it will be located on beta.sam.gov. I talked about FPDS, I've talked about USA Spending. Dynamic Small Business Search, it only comes after you register in SAM. Once you register in SAM, there's a button at the end of the certification page that you need to click on. It asks you, do you want to create or update your SBA profile? Always select yes before you save and continue to the next page, because that way when you call into our office, to the SBA office, we can go in and put your DUNS number in there and we can find you easier than going through SAM. Because if anybody ever been in SAM, you know it's a beast by itself. And speaking of SAM, SAM is the System for Award Management. In order to do any type of business with the federal government, you have to be registered in SAM to do that. But first, in order to register in SAM, you must have a DUNS number. Duns and Bradstreet. I don't know if most of you have heard, but Duns and Bradstreet is a 9-digit code that the federal government gives you that they track your business. And when you're going through Duns and Bradstreet, when you put your email address in, when you put your phone number in, because someone has asked me this before, you will get a phone call. You would get an email. I was speaking to a young lady yesterday. She was like, Miss Angela, is it you all who's asking for $3,500? I'm like, no, that's not SBA. All our services are free. So if you all can see, this is Duns and Bradstreet. This is where you go to get your DUNS number. Once you go in, the first thing it's going to ask you to do is put in your email address and your phone number. Once you do that, you will start receiving emails and phone calls from small businesses who have a database. That's the only thing they have access to is your phone number and your email address. And they will tell you they can assist you. So you can pay them the $3,500 and let them assist, or you can use our SBDC, our WBC, and our SCORE office for free. That's up to you whether you want them to assist you or not. But you can get the same thing done yourself. You can do it yourself. It takes longer. It's going to take the same amount of time because you'll have to send them information also. But this is Dun and Bradstreet, where you go to get your DUNS number that is required to register in SAM, and you're going to need a tax ID number, an EIN number. Then when you get into SAM, this is what the website should look like. It is free. No one should ask you for a credit card. It is free. So if someone is asking you for your credit information, that means this is not this site. On Duns and Bradstreet, they ask the question, do you want us to monitor your credit? That's up to you. I'm not going to tell you yay or nay, but you don't have to. If you already have a credit monitoring system, you know how your credit is, you don't need them to monitor because it's a monthly fee. So that's up to you if you decide to do that. That's the only time they're going to ask you for your credit card. Other than with SAM, They will ask you for your account information. Always state that you accept credit cards, because if you have a small purchase, the federal government purchases your service with credit cards. And if you don't accept credit card payments, I think it's called ACH payments, credit card payments, sometimes they'll move on to the next person that will accept credit cards. So if you have a $10,000 or less purchase, the federal government can use their purchase card to purchase your service. So make sure you check the box that you do accept credit cards, or get your business to a place where you can accept credit cards, because those little small purchases add up. And next with Sam, they're going to ask you, I think it's maybe the second page or the second or third question, do you have a cage code? Say no. They will assign you one. So it's no bad thing to say no to not having a cage code because you don't. They will assign you one. Once you complete the system, complete the SAM process, you will be assigned a cage code. Any questions?
There is just one person, and Michael's doing a great job with answering things. Thank you, Michael.
Okay.
Glenda Woodard, thank you for your question or statement. She says, I have been trying to sign up for a DUNS and SAM with no available help. Glenda, as Angela shared with us, you can reach out to your local SBDC office, and a consultant can assist you with that. And also, there are some steps within the presentation that will help you with your SAM registration and your DUNS number. And I should say, because DUNS comes before SAM.
Yes. And you can also, the number that's on the screen, I don't know if you're on your computer, but the number that's on the screen, if you call that number, someone can assist you also. The 86, for those who are not on the computer, is 866-705-5711.
And Angela, and one thing I could add too is that there's a great, actually I started typing that out, but you did a great job answering that. So we actually have a quick reference sheet too, and it kind of goes step by step, you know, how to get a DUNS. It'll take you in the right area, and then most people can get by with that, but then like we have our resource partners. You can call our office. We're used to getting calls. We help people with SAM registration all the time. So you know, make sure you use your resources.
And Michael, if we can get a copy of that reference sheet, I will send that out to all of the participants as well.
I'm taking notes, Karen.
Perfect.
I will have it as part of the packet that I send you, the information.
Perfect. Thank you all so much.
No problem. And next, you have to get to work, submit your bid. Scott is going to go over later on this afternoon about bids, how to submit bids, and what federal government is looking for. But one thing I'm going to tell you, that for those who have never submitted a bid for a federal contract, when they say submit your bid by March 12th at 10 o'clock, they meant 10 o'clock, not 10 o'clock with 1 second, 10 o'clock with 1 minute. If you do not have your bid submitted by 10 o'clock or post dated by 10 o'clock on the due date, is considered non-responsive. So make sure, that's one thing I have to always tell clients when I'm talking to them, when they're submitting bids. That's one thing the federal government is a stickler for. You can have the best proposal ever, but if you don't submit on time, it's considered non-responsive. Now we're going to go into the SBA programs. The SBA, the federal government, we have 4 preferential programs. We have the Women-Owned Small Business Program. We have the Service Disabled Veteran Program. We have what most people call is the Minority Program, but it's considered, we're calling it the 8A program. And we have the HubZone program. As you see on my chart, 5% of those billions of dollars that the federal government spends every year have to go where each agency try to make 5% of their goals go to women-owned small business, 5% go to the 8A program, 3% goes to HubZone, and 3% goes to Service Disabled Veteran. That's only 16% of the 23% that the federal government mandate must go to small businesses. So with that 16%, those are the preferential programs that SBA manages, but the other 7% goes to small businesses. Ones that just registered in SAM that does not have one of these 4 designations, small businesses, that's 7%. And if you go out to beta.sam.gov, you will see set-asides just for small businesses. So if you're registered in SAM and you don't have any one of these 4 preferential programs, you are still eligible for contracts under a small business set-aside. And when I talk about set-asides are when the federal government does a marketing analysis and they put a source of salt or pre-solicitation out there, and you go online and you express interest in that set-aside. If the majority of the people that express interest are woman-owned or 8A or HubZone or Services Every Veteran, whichever one have the majority of the number of people that express interest, typically that's who they set aside for. But the 8A program is the rule of 2, right? Mike, is it the rule of 3?
All programs have the rule of 2. Like like if you have 2
or more,
2 or more that can compete, or that can do the contract, you normally would compete it.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, Carolyn, before I start going into the programs?
Hey, Angela. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, Michael.
No, I just wanted to do the foot stomper because we usually try to mention this. Somebody asked a great question about I think they said somebody started asking them for $600 to register in SAM. And we always try to foot stomp that. Always make sure you go to the .gov site, www.sam.gov. I put the address in there. Because there are companies out there that will charge you $500-$600 to register in SAM, and of course you can do it yourself, and you probably want to do it yourself. Same with some of the other programs that Angela's going to talk about, like the 8A Business Development Program. There's always companies out there, consulting companies that'll charge you big fees. Let's just say with the 8A programs, $5,000-$6,000 to help you get into the program, and nobody can ever guarantee you're going to get into the program anyways. They may tell you you can get contracts and all kinds of good stuff that might sound good. So it's kind of, whenever somebody asks you for a credit card or do you see a fee, and we're telling you we work for the federal government, you pay for us with your tax dollars. So everything we do is free of charge at the SBA, and our resource partners, the SBDC and such, pretty much the same thing. They do classes sometimes that have they could talk about that better than me. I don't want to speak for them, but they may have a minimal charge. Thanks.
Well, and I see that this person was saying that they're receiving solicitations saying that they're not completely registered. Only sam.gov can tell you if you are registered or not. So I'm not sure how these people are getting that information and then reaching out to you to tell you you've not finished your registration.
They don't have their personal information. They just have their phone number and email address. That's that little small business that I was telling you all about from the beginning. When you start registering in SAM, or you register for your DUNS number, they have some way, I don't know, haven't figured it out yet, but they have a way of getting your email address and your phone number, and they start to call. When you register in SAM, when you immediately finish registering SAM, I'm going to tell you right now, it takes 2.5, 3 hours, depending on how computer savvy you are, because you have to put information in there. When you first register in SAM, you will get an email saying, thank you for completing your SAM profile or your SAM application. 7 to 10 days after that, depending on the working days, how many people work in that day, you will get another email. Once they verify your DUNS number, verify your EIN number, and verify your SAM, all three of those sites have to talk. So it takes 7 to 10 days. Once you finish and they've talked to each other, they will send you another email telling you, congratulations, you have successfully completed your SAM profile. At that point, you can start registering for the 8A program, the woman-owned small business, the HubZone. You can even start going after contracts at that time. So if you're registered in SAM completely, or you can call our office. we can go into SAM and put your DUNS number in there and tell if you completed your DUNS profile. That's why I say when you go through SAM, make sure you create an SBA profile, but I have access to get into SAM and I can check through your DUNS to make sure to see if your DUNS application has been completed. So, but yeah, there's a way, Carolyn, that somehow small business now, they can get your email address and phone number. They just want you, like I say, a lady called yesterday.
They want your money.
Yeah, she said someone wanted to charge her $3,500 to do this.
Well, and then we also, because I know that you have to renew your registration. I don't know what the time frame is, but when it gets close to renewal, you know, you'll start getting those emails. I'll renew for you for $500, $1,000. So all of that, I mean, and you said it very, very clearly, Angela, this service is free.
Yes. I even take the time out. If I have it in my schedule, if you set an appointment, I've taken the time out to walk clients through with their SAM profile because they have come upon glitches that maybe I can figure out that they don't know. Any questions before I go on to 8A program, start talking about the 8A program? I think Michael is handling all the questions in the chat box for me.
Yes.
I'm trying. There's some really good questions there too, because you know, like I said, somebody put a link to a site there, and the same thing. If you went to Google and you put SAM in there, you'll come up with all kinds of sites that are not the real one. Always type in that address. If you don't remember anything else when you're getting ready to register, always type in www.sam.gov. The .gov is the key.
Yes. Well, we're going to start with the 8A program. 8A program, you have to be socially and economically disadvantaged, and you have to be in business for at least 2 years to be considered, not in the program, to be automatically considered for the program. When they say socially disadvantaged, you have to fall into one of the 5 categories that stated in step 1. You have to be African, Black American, Asian Pacific, Hispanic, Native American, or Asian American. You have to be considered, but not saying they are the only ones that can get in the program. If you can show a preponderance of evidence that for some reason you've been discriminated against, because right now we currently have a Caucasian male in our program who was a veteran, and because of whatever his disability was in the military, it precluded him from getting promoted, and he actually got put out of the military for his disability. So he could show that evidence that the reason why he couldn't move forward in the world, in his business life, they took that into consideration and they allowed him in the program. So if you can show for some reason, like we also had a Caucasian female who was considered legally blind, and she was in corporate America, and she couldn't get promoted. She couldn't go any further, and she ended up starting her own, I think it was an IT firm. And those are some of the examples. If you can show for some reason that you cannot move forward in the corporate America in life with your disabilities, the federal government will take that in consideration. That's called a preponderance of evidence. And when they talk about economic disadvantage, your personal net worth has to be less than $750,000, and your 3-year average income, they just moved it to 5 years, has to be less than $350. And everything, including all your assets, your business, your home, cars, and everything has to fall less than $6 million in order to be considered for the 8A program. And like I stated, you have to be in business for at least 2 years because you have to show taxes. Part of the 8A application is they want 2 years taxes, and they want 2 years of your financials. When they ask for taxes, it does not have to be the 1120S, which are the business taxes. You can show your personal taxes, your 1040, but they want to see a Schedule C, your itemization. So they want the 1120S and the 1040, or the 1040 with the Schedule C. So make sure you have those documentations, because that's what a lot of people miss out on. They don't have the correct documentations. And in order to apply for the 8A program, again, you need a DUNS number, because when you go into certified.sba.gov, where you go to apply for the 8A program, It's going to ask you for your DUNS number, and make sure, because when you go through SAM, you're going to have to create a MPIN. That's a digital signature. So anyone who's ever done their own taxes, you have to do a digital signature. That's what this is. That's a digital signature. So make sure you write your MPIN down. I think it's a 5 to 6 digit code that you create in SAM, because you're going to need that to get in certified. So make sure you write that down. And you're gonna need your NAICS code. You can have 100 NAICS code, because there are 1,000 NAICS code out there, but you have to have one that's considered primary. That's why they ask for your taxes. They want to see what the majority of your income or your revenue is coming from. That's what they considered your primary NAICS code. Now, some people have 50 NAICS code, but your primary one will be the one, just like construction. Are you the builder? Are you the drywall or the plumber? You know, you can do all those things, but the one that you earn majority of your revenue in will be considered your primary NAICS code. And as I stated, the certified system is where you go to apply for the 8A program. And on the certified system, you can go to certified.sba.gov, and it has all our programs here. So you can click on it, and it tells you what you need, what documentation is needed in order to register in the 8A program. With the 8A program, it gives you a list. It's coming up. It's coming up.
Angela, real quick, we have a gentleman. Thank you, Johnny Curry, for your question. I have a new logistics company, been in business less than 2 years, but I'm considered legally blind. Would I be eligible for the 8A program?
Johnny, before you say you've been in for less than 2 years, blind, and you consider legally blind, you're eligible for the program. They require you to have 2 years, but before you started your business, do you have background in what your business is?
So that would be the key. If he has background in that business that would equivalent to 2 years.
Yes, if he have managerial background, like running a business, or he was a manager of a business, that's the same background that his business is in, they would take that into consideration and give him a 2-year waiver. We don't always talk about the 2-year waiver, but there is a 2-year waiver, but you have to have experience, like a managerial experience in the area. You can't have a managerial experience in a cook, but you're trying to do construction. If you understand what I'm saying, Carolyn?
Yes, ma'am, I clearly do. So it has to be within that same specific field.
Yes, you have to have managerial experience.
For you to have that time counted towards your 2 years.
Yes.
Okay.
If you
I hope that was helpful, Johnny.
Yeah, just tell them to put it in the chat box, because Mike is also responding to the chat.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'll chime in real quick. That's Angela mentioned it. There is a way you can get a waiver, and there's like 5 different rules that I can't think of off the top of my head, but I would recommend Johnny to get with our office, and we'll give you the reference for that if you think it might apply. I don't remember if Angela mentioned that, but we had a person in the Charleston area, Caucasian female, and she was considered legally blind, and that's how she got into the program.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not in one of those groups, that in itself, can be considered.
This is the checklist for the 8A program of the documents that are required. If you go to certified website, click on the 8A application, it'll take you to that checklist that I just pulled up, and it'll tell you all the documents that are required in order to register for the 8A program. But if you're still unsure if you are eligible for any of our preferential programs, they're also on the certified website. There's a survey that you go through, and you just answer the questions. At the end, it's going to tell you you may be eligible, you may not be eligible. But like I tell all the clients when I talk to them, the computer may say that you may not be eligible. Submit your paperwork and let headquarters tell you whether or not you need additional paperwork or you're not eligible. It's not my call to tell you. We don't even see the application until they are done or there's an issue and we can go in the system. Woman-owned small business. In order to be eligible for the woman-owned small business, as with all our four preferential programs, you have to own 51% in the company. That means you have to run the day-to-day, you have to own and control 51% of the operation of the day-to-day operations. With the woman-owned small business and the economic disadvantaged woman-owned small business, there is a specific NAICS code, because not all NAICS code fall under WOSB or EDWOSB. So if you go to the SBA.gov website under contracting, you can pull up the size standard chart or the economic disadvantaged woman-owned small business chart, and it'll give you a list of all those NAICS code that falls under that's considered WOSB or EDWOSB. And in order to be in the woman-owned small business or economic disadvantaged woman-owned small business, your personal net worth has to be $750,000. Your 3-year average must not exceed $350,000. And fair market value must be less than $6 million. You must be registered in SAM, and now with the new change that came out in October 15th of 2020, is no longer in certified. They have their own website. It's beta.certified.sba.gov, where you go to register for the woman-owned small business, and there are only a few documents that are required for WOSB. And they require proof of your citizenship, and they require that, which is a birth certificate or passport, a resume, and your articles of organization are the only documents that are required for the woman-owned small business program, and you must be registered in SAM. For all our programs, you must be registered in SAM. As I stated, in October of last year, there were a few changes that came about. Before October the 15th, there was a self-certification page, self-certification of the woman-owned small business, which meant you can check that you are a woman-owned small business in SAM, and then you just upload your documents into a repository. Now you have to actually apply for the woman-owned small business certification, and that is done through beta.certified.sba.gov. Or you can use a third-party certifier that has been vetted by the SBA. With the third-party certifier, there is a fee. But with SBDC, WBC, and SCORE, there is not. So take advantage of our free services. And if they cannot answer the questions or help you with this service that you need, you can always reach out to our office, and we can forward up to headquarters to get assistance for you or get an answer for you if there's any problem with your registering in the system. And then here are more changes that happened over the past year since the pandemic had us sitting at home. So we had time to make changes, where headquarters had time to make changes. These are just the changes that happened over the past year with the woman-owned small business and the EDWOSB. HubZone. HubZone stands for Historically Underutilized Business Zone. So like I stated earlier, every 10 years, the federal government does a census. And when they do a census, they declare certain areas as underserved, low income, low jobless areas. So they declare those areas as HubZone. In order to be a HubZone, like I stated with all our programs, you have to be 51% owned. 35% of your employees have to reside in a HubZone. It does not have to be the same HubZone that your company is in, but they must reside in a HubZone. And your primary office have to be in a HubZone. So if you have a home-based office, your home must be in a HubZone. There's no problem with having a home-based office, because a lot of people do start from home. but your office space, if you're doing a HubZone application, it has to be your office space, if it's at home, has to be in a HubZone. And to determine if your business and your employees reside in a HubZone, if you go to sba.gov/HubZone, there's a map. There's a map that you go to, and you have to put your full email address. What's our email? 1835. Been so long since I've been to the office, I forgot where I was. I know before our building shut down, we were in the HubZone. Okay, we're still in the HubZone. So downtown, the federal building downtown on Assembly Street is still considered a HubZone. Okay, because I've gone out to a HubZone visit, because we do HubZone visits. So when I've gone out to a HubZone visit, on one side of the street, that business in a HubZone, 4 lanes across the street, that area is not a HubZone. So that's why they ask you to put your complete address in the HubZone map to determine. See, as you see right here, the governor mansion is not considered a HubZone, because that's where he is, back in this area where the governor mansion is. And over there, that area is not considered a HubZone. So it all depends. Carolyn, are you all still seeing my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so if you see, that's why they ask you to put the entire address, because sometimes some areas considered a HubZone right directly across the street from it, it's not. So make sure you put the correct address, your full address. And
so Angela, what I'm hearing is it's not just the name of the street, it's the actual physical number included with the street address.
Yes, sometimes you take in consideration some places like Sumter. If I'm not mistaken, the entire town of Sumter is a HubZone. Marion County, I know I'm going to Marion County, those small towns are HubZone. Bamberg, if I'm not mistaken, is the entire county is a HubZone. But when it comes to larger areas like Charleston and Columbia, not all areas are considered HubZone. You just have to put the address in to give you, and your employees, 35%, they're going to ask for a copy of your employees' lease or mortgage, a copy of their latest utility bill, and a driver's license that has that address on it. So those are some of the documentations that is required to submit for this application process.
So Angela, we have a question. Thank you, Derek. It's in regards to the HubZone, and I believe this is correct. He said he applied, but because my employees were not any HubZone, I was declined, even though the business and myself were in the HubZone. And that goes back to the slide you have up, that 35% of the employees must be in the HubZone.
Correct.
Okay.
That is correct. If he was the only employee, that would be fine. But since he have other additional employees, 35% of those employees must reside in the HubZone.
And then Derek said, so now if it's just me and I'm the only employee versus when he had employees, that would make it 100% of the employees in the HubZone. Could he reapply?
Yes. Yes. Most time with SBA, I think they require you to wait a year after you've been denied. But if you can apply, I have to look into. Michael, are you still on?
Yes, ma'am.
Do they still make you, after you apply and get denied, is the HubZone just like the 8A, they make you wait a year after you apply to reapply?
I want to say for the HubZone, it's if you're 90 days, if your circumstances have changed. Because like the gentleman that asked the question, if he applied initially, and he didn't have the 35%, and then he is on his own. So it's me, myself, and I, you're in a HubZone, that would be 100%. Because that's the example I use sometimes. If, for 35%, if you had yourself and 2 other employees, and then 2 out of 3 of you lived in the HubZone, that would be 66%. And then if somebody comes in Monday morning and said, hey, I moved this weekend, and they moved not within a hub zone, then you drop down to 33%. They have relaxed the rules a little bit. You know, you have to hit that 35% initially, but when changes like that occur, there is a gray area where you can work with the office. And in the office, the certification for the hub zone that goes through our headquarters. So we're always working with them and asking questions. So if you ever have questions on that, in fact, they do a phone call once a week also.
Every Thursday at 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. And the HubZone application go through General Login Service System, or GLS. So if I was sending that, because a lot of people always ask me how to get to GLS, I will send that link to GLS so they can go into get into GLS to apply for the HubZone. And again, you must be registered in SAM. You must have a DUNS number in order to do GLS also. And it just changed beginning this year or last year that the HubZone, it went from 3 years to 5 years. So you have to recertify now every 5 years. And I didn't mention when I talked about the 8A program, the 8A program is a 9-year business development program. The first 4 years is a developmental stage where you're hitting the ground running, trying to learn the 8A program, learn federal government. In the last 5 years, we're just like you do your kids when you're trying to get them off the bottle. They wean you off of the program. So a certain percentage of the program during that 5th year or the first year of the transition year, you have to make sure you do non-8A work, which means because with the 8A program, you can get an 8A set aside. That means anything less than $4.5 million, you can bid on it. You can without anyone ever knowing it. So that's how the 8A, that's one of the benefits of being in the 8A program. You can get the 8A set aside, which we have a lot of firms that do get 8A set asides, where you market to the federal government, like the list I'm going to send out, and they have an opportunity they think that you can do. If it's less than $4.5 million, just went up to the 0.5 last year. If it's less than $4.5 million, they can source it to you without ever competing for anyone else to know. And once in the 8A program, it must remain in the 8A program unless they're, for some reason, they cannot, we don't have no one else in the United States in the 8A program that can do that. And they have to show that they've done a market research and no one else can do that job. So if you're in the 8A program, that's one of the benefits. Services of a veteran, you have to be 51% owned, and you have to have a 0 to 100% rating with the VA saying that you have a disability. 0 is considered a rating for services of a veteran. You must be the highest paid. That's what all of our programs. You must be the highest paid officer. The veteran has to be the one that manages the business day to day, and you have to have the proper NAICS code. I know I gave out a lot of information. I know Carolyn said there was a lot of questions in the chat box, and I know Michael answered a lot of questions while we were going through while I was going through the presentation. If you have any further questions after today, and after you reach out to your SBDCs, Women's Business Center or SCORE, and you still need further assistance, on the screen there's a copy, or there's our office information. So we are considered the subject matter expert.
So Angela, I'll review some of the things that we have listed here. Some of them you have covered and some of them Michael has covered as well. So here's one quick question related to small business certification. This is from Jim, thank you. Self-certified as a small business based upon the SBA size standards using the NAICS. Thus, it is eligible for government programs and preferences reserved for small business concerns. So I'm thinking that since he is considered a small business and has the NAICS code that considers him a small business, does this make him eligible for government programs and
Not
preferences?
unless you're registered in SAM. You have to be registered in SAM.
Okay.
Although you have the NAICS code and your NAICS code determined that you're small, if you are not registered in SAM, the federal government contracting office is not going to even deal. The first thing they're going to do is ask you for your DUNS number. They're going to look into the system. If you're not registered in SAM, they're not going to even work with you. You have to be registered in SAM in order to work with the federal government.
And so he went a little farther and say we have self-certified as a small business. We don't meet the 8A requirement, specifically HubZone. Is there a small business certification available to us from the SBA? We have clients asking us for small business certification.
Once you're registered in SAM, that is the certification. SBA doesn't give certificates, but if you're registered in SAM, that is a small business certification right there. They should be able, if they're a federal government agency, they should be able to go into SAM or DSBS and find your certifications that you register in SAM. That's the certification that SBA have. Now, I know on the state side, if you are a minority, they have the MBE or the WBE with SMBCC, and then DOT has the DBE program. So those are some certifications. They actually give certificates, but with SBA, we don't give certificates. We just make sure that you're registered. And with SAM, you have to register annually. If I'm not mistaken, they sent out an alert 30, I think it's 60 and 30 days out that you're expiring, your SAM profile will be expiring.
And I think I might be able to answer this question. This is from Derek. Is there a new, I think you meant to say PTAC for South Carolina, or is it only Columbia? Currently, we have business consultants at the SBDC offices that specialize in government contracting. So it's defined a little differently right now. So they're not PTAC consultants, they're small business development center consultants that specialize in government contracting. So
Yes.
there is one currently based out of Columbia, and Sherry Pittenger is based out of the Greenville area. And but they assist people throughout the state.
Yes.
And predominantly because we're all working remotely and we're conducting business by phone and Zoom, it's really been quite helpful for everyone throughout the state to be able to contact those two individuals. And in just a few minutes, as soon as Angela is finished, we're going to hear from Scott Bellows, who is the government contracting specialist based out of Columbia.
And if you cannot reach Scott or Sherry, you can always reach out to our office. We have Carl and Michael, who are fluent in government contracting. I'm making my way there, but they can answer just about any question that you may have.
Here's another question. When is the ideal time to apply for 8A to make the most of the 8-year period before
Michael,
you win a I'm sorry?
I was going to ask Michael if he want to answer that question. Me, him and Carl throw that question around all the time.
Yeah.
And he continues to say, before you win a contract, have any federal contract performance, or after you have some federal performance and have a relationship with government customers.
That's a great question. And actually the way they worded that question, you almost answered part of it, because you're only in the program. It's actually 9 years. It's a business development program. And just like the waiver part that somebody asked about, we don't push the waiver too much unless you really have some background and we feel that you can hit the ground running. Because as soon as you get into that 8A program, your 9 years starts coming, or starts going. You're ticking down, and we've had good and bad where somebody was in the program. They came into the program and they didn't get any contracts until they had 6 or 7 years in the program, which relates to that question. You have to be ready to hit the ground running. So if you can do some subcontracting, get your feet wet into some of the federal contracts or even state and local, anything helps just to get used to the system. You have to make a business decision when you want to apply, because you don't know how long it's going to take either. I mean, it's really improved. That I would say, as far as the application process, this right now is the best time to apply, because they've really streamlined the process. We've had people getting in, within a month or two, and it used to be it does still happen because you really have to get all your paperwork together. And I encourage you, when you do get ready to apply, to contact our office and work with us, because we can catch some of the low hanging fruit, even though we don't approve your application. In fact, there's a nice handout. Remind me that, Angela, too, that new one I found yesterday.
Yeah.
That kind of walks you through the process. If you don't remember anything else from our part of it, and I know Scott's going to talk and just add more to it, always start off at the website, SBA.gov, and then you're going to get the SBDC website too. Actually, you can get to the SBDC from our website too. But to go into the specifics on the programs, always start off at SBA.gov, and you can't go wrong. And we're going to send you a nice email with a bunch of links and a bunch of attachments. So we'll double check and make sure that we got them all before we hit the send button, and then you'll have emails to reply back. Go ahead.
And so thank you, Jewel. It says that Stephanie's email address was, if we could put up the previous slide. Angela, your last slide. Stephanie's email was your email address. So they're asking if you could update that slide before we distribute it.
Wrong. Yeah, I see the phone number's wrong, but I need to update it also.
And then
yeah.
One last question before we move on to Scott. Thank you all for your expertise. I'm minority owned, non-service connected veteran, but I am considered legally blind by the military, not located in a hub zone, and been in business for less than a year. I'm eligible, am I eligible for any government contracts? Being in business less than a year, I would think no, but Angela, I'm gonna refer to your expertise.
He can do small business set aside since he does not have in the preferential, he's not in any one of our preferential program. There are set asides just for small business. The pool is a lot larger than when you do for 8A or woman owned or hub zone or service day veteran. But since you are declared legally blind, you can, once you reach that 2-year mark, you can actually apply for the 8A program.
The only one that requires that 2 years is the 8A program. Any of the others, there's no requirement.
And that's all we have. So Scott, if you are ready.
I am ready.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I know this, I'm kind of at the tail end of this presentation, and so I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. My purpose is really just to give you a little bit of a perspective of what the SBDC can offer you in the context of government contracting, which you've heard quite a bit about today. Would you like to go to the next slide, please? Just real quick, this is our mission statement for the South Carolina SBDC, and in general, it's to help you grow small businesses. That's okay, go on to the next one. Your objective probably is to get a contract, preferably a big government contract, so you can make money and you can pay your bills. You know, so if you think about the two, we're really there to assist you to try to get you those contracts so that you can grow your business. You know, you can make more money, you can pay your bills and do all that good stuff. Next slide. However, from my point of view, you know, everything you've heard today is what I would call a necessary but not sufficient course of action. Anyone that's had a hub zone, 8A, their small business or whatever, will tell you that it's still a really competitive world out there. And what I'd like to do is kind of go through a few things and give you a little bit of a different perspective on what that would relate to. The FAR is the Federal Acquisition Regulations, relates to federal contracting. Almost everything you've heard today relates to federal contracting. You should bear in mind that the federal market is one government market. The state market's another, the city, the county, those are different markets. And you may or may not find the federal market to be your niche. I have contractors that do a lot of state contracting. They don't do any federal contracting and vice versa. So you need to recognize that regardless of which level of government, the regulations are something that you're bit by bit going to have to learn, because that's the rule book. That's how you're going to learn to play the game, if you will. Next slide. Something that you'll read in almost every solicitation, almost every contract, is that these contracts are awarded by the contracting officer to responsible prospective contractors. And the word that you need to focus on there is responsible. Okay, next slide. And so the question is, what is responsible? And if you go down this list, you're going to see things like you have adequate financial resources. Okay, you can actually deliver on time. You have a past performance record that seems to imply that you can do that, right? Integrity and business ethics. You haven't been thrown in jail lately, that kind of thing. You have the experience, and the accounting control. Oh, can you back up one? And you have the equipment and everything. Quite often, I'm approached by people in my capacity that say, I'm starting a business and I want to know how I can get government contracts. And they're kind of the mindset that they seem to have is, if I could just get a contract, then I can fund my business, I can grow my business, everything will be great. Generally speaking, you don't want to get into government contracting until you've got the basics of your business ironed out. And I would say to start with that people like in our Charleston office and our other SBDC offices, a lot of what they do is not government contracting. They help you develop your business. They address the general business development needs, whether it's business plans or the financing or strategy development, all those good things. And so don't disregard those if you're planning to get into government contracting. Next.
And Scott, thank you for that, because we do get a lot of calls here in Charleston, and it's almost like what comes first, the chicken or the egg.
Yep.
So developing the business, doing it correctly, and starting in that frame first, and then looking at government contracts. So thank you for that, Scott.
Not a problem. Another thing that it's a distinction between the commercial market, the private sector market, and the government market is in the government, most of the larger contracts are signed off on, if you will, by a contracting officer. And what makes a contracting officer is that they have a warrant. And the warrant authorizes them to obligate funds on behalf of the US government. You can be a colonel, you can be some muckety-muck program manager in the government, but you can't obligate the funding. And so you've got to bear in mind that means that a lot of these contract actions are being funneled through a contracting office. And I know Michael Corr could easily talk about this because he was in that position before, but I think it's fair to say that the workload is hefty when you're in those positions. And quite often you'll find that the contracting officers they've got a desk full of files and they're just trying to keep up with the load. But the other thing to keep in mind is, when you go to them, you kind of feel like, well, you work for me, I'm the vendor and this is the contract and it's between you and me. To a large extent, I think the perspective you might want to have is that the contracting officer is trying to help the government carry out its objectives. And quite often a contracting officer will look at other government employees as their clients, probably more than you. They're trying to help the facilities manager or they're trying to help some other program manager get their jobs done. And you are the tool that's going to make that happen. And that's why they're interested in responsible government contractors. Next slide. One of the other things that comes up increasingly because of workloads is a lot of contracts are what they call bundled. And essentially what it is if, let's say at Fort Jackson or Joint Base Charleston, they were going to build a new building. Well, they could divide that construction process up into 100 different contracts, one for plumbing, one for carpentry, one for roofing, one for windows. They could go on and on and on, but in reality, they don't. What they do is they say, okay, general contractor, here's a big contract, you do it. But if you're a big, determined by the SBA size standards to be a large contractor, and I think it's $750,000 or more per contract, you have to have a subcontracting plan. So guess what? Give us a subcontracting plan. Here's the big contract. You hire all the smaller contractors. Okay, next slide. Which gets into the whole topic of subcontracting. And for many of you in the audience, this is probably an area that you would want to think about starting at. And the thing you want to keep in mind is that when you're a subcontractor, you are not, you may think that you're working for the government, you know, you may feel like it, you may be out at, Joint Base Charleston or something, but really you're working for the prime contractor, okay? And so one of the things, though, that's good about this is the prime contractor might get a huge, 200-page document called a contract, and it's got all sorts of requirements in it. Well, you can bet that a good share of those requirements are going to get passed down to the subcontractors because, if they're responsible, they want you to be responsible. So that's a way to start to learn the process. It's a way for you to start learning what it would be like if you had the prime contract. You start realizing what's involved in getting paid by the government. They do pay well, but if you don't know how to invoice correctly or something, it can cause all sorts of problems. But anyway, subcontracting is important. And so, and as it says at the bottom of the slide, if the subcontractor fails to perform, then guess what? They don't go back to the government and say, hey, we really gave this subcontractor a shot, but they really screwed up and it cost us $10,000. So please give us $10,000 more. They're still responsible, which means prime contractors quite often are reluctant to just take on any subcontractor. So your ability to network and to market to the prime contractor community, there's a bit of an art to it. And that's one of the areas that I tend to spend quite a bit of time, as do many of my colleagues. Next slide. This just summarizes what I've been saying, which is you've got to be a responsible contractor. A lot of this work goes through contracting officers and these big contracts, and consequently, prime contractors are your avenue for getting your foot in the door, but they also want you to be a proven commodity, which means you better have a good sales pitch. Next slide. So what can you do? I tried to put a few thoughts together in terms of what would help you do this. I would say first and foremost is don't just say, oh, I've heard all these wonderful things today and this is my salvation. Kind of be honest with yourself and say, are there areas in my business that are weak? One of the ones I hit on all the time is, and it's down there in one of those bullets, is the accounting system. If you don't have a handle on your finances, you can really run into trouble. You should have some sort of a plan on how you're going to grow your business, a business plan of sorts. Your business processes, quite often that involves, again, just something as simple as being able to invoice correctly, to do estimates correctly, the paper flow, if I can put it that way. There's a lot of documentation involved in government contracting. Angela's already talked about SAM, any set-asides. Angela, again, has talked about that. For people that have work in like the construction sector, things like bonding can become important. So you need to be cognizant if your funding is at risk that you get your credit score in good shape so that you can start working on getting increased levels of funding. Again, document. It's not just filling out the paperwork, but keeping documentation is important. The last one is what I alluded to a few minutes ago, is you really need to learn how to network You can't, even before COVID, you couldn't just drive up to the gates at Fort Jackson and say, hey, I just want to go in and meet some people. They'll just turn you around and say, thank you, but no thank you, and you're off. There is a different process for corresponding and presenting yourself to the government. And that's a topic, I think, for another presentation, but be aware of that. Next slide. And that's the end of my short and sweet presentation.
Thank you, Scott. We do have a few questions, and we're right on time. So thank you, everyone, for the attention to detail as well as the attention to time. So let's see. The VA also posts their requirements on Beta SAM, and you can also look at awards made at, okay, so that was a comment. Oh, that was from Michael. Sorry, Michael. Here we go. Are the subcontractors paid at the mercy of the prime? Does the government mandate that some subcontractors are paid within 30 to 45 days?
And Michael may have a comment on this. My experience has been that the prime contractors do a fairly good job, but typically what they'll do is they'll say, for instance, okay, you have to have in your timesheets, your sometimes it's a certified payroll. It's a little bit more complicated sometimes than in the private sector, and by a certain date. So that means, first of all, you've got a month of work possibly before you submit it, and then they would generally pay you maybe within 30 days. And so that's, again, part of the challenge. If you get a big government contract, and by big, I'm saying, let's say you had 4 people working for you on a contract, and take 4 salaries times 2 months and say, okay, can you fund that? And if you can't, then right off the bat, you're going to have to say, well, then I need to find out how I'm going to get the funding, because the people that work for me aren't going to work for free, or they're going to become disgruntled, and then they're going to go to the contracting officer and say, this guy's not paying me, and it causes all sorts of problems. Again, if you are a subcontractor, you're running into problems. There are some avenues that you could take it to the federal government, to the contracting officer. Generally speaking, however, they do not encourage that, if you will. So it's between you and the prime contractor. They will pay you a competitive rate. By competitive, it means you have competed for that subcontract, which again goes back to your accounting system. You need to know the point that you're making a profit and when you're going to start losing money on this contract. And a lot of people tend to guess at that, and that's not something you want to do, certainly in government contracting. The only exception to all of what I've said is there are times when the wage levels are determined by the government. There's minimum levels, the Davis-Bacon Act, but that's kind of an aside.
We do have another comment and question, and I can only speak for the SBDC, but will you guys in the foreseeable future have any in-person training for newly developed businesses to help grow their business, or will everything be done online or virtual? There is not a specific plan from the SBDC for us returning to work and seeing clients face to face. So there is not a specific plan for doing in-person training events. So there is no foreseeable future for doing that as of today. We may move towards something in the fall, but I don't foresee that we'll be meeting in person or providing in-person training this spring or even into the summer potentially.
Yeah.
The other part of that is also our state and local government contracts are as demanding as federal contracts.
They're less demanding, I would say. As an example, the FAR is probably, and again, Michael, you can feel free to chip in. I'm guessing it's close to 2,000 pages of relatively small print. The City of Columbia's procurement code, last time I checked, was 19 pages, including the cover page. State procurement's somewhere in, it's more than the city, a lot less than federal. there tends to be at the, and I'm speaking from my own observation, so take it with a grain of salt. To become a federal contracting officer is not something they just say, we'll take a 2-hour course and here's your warrant. I know when I, in a previous life, I was a federal contracting officer, and it involved 6 months of course training and another 6 months of on-the-job training before I ever saw a warrant. At the lower levels, I've seen a fair amount of inconsistency in the regulations as they were presented, which I think is a reflection of the amount of training that the people get. I find that there's more opportunity at the lower levels. By lower, I'm talking about county and city, and to some extent state, to get to know the people and to maybe get your foot in the door. But by the same token, the dollars available for contracts are much less at those levels. The federal government spends a lot of money, and so it's a trade-off. I would not preclude, I think you need to look at all the markets and find out, depending on your business, where you can find an opportunity.
So Michael, thank you. So Michael said that the SBA always has done both person and virtual. So Michael, do you foresee that you'll be doing in-person training sessions in Columbia?
Yes, good question. And we have always done that. We've always tried to do a combination of in-person and online, but right now we are kind of in the same boat with working from home. And there's preferences that people have, whether some people like the convenience of the online training. Some people, even before all this pandemic, they came to an in-person one, went to the same class online, or vice versa. So there's a lot of preference there, but right now we're for lack of a better word, we're stuck with doing online, and it's a good benefit too, because we usually travel all throughout the state. Like Angela may be in Charleston right now under normal circumstances, so she has to take a whole day out versus a couple hours. So there's good and bad. And I just want to say, like everything Scott said, those are kind of the things, we don't want to give you unreal expectations either, because when you come to our office, even when I was a contracting officer, and you come into the office and you say, here's what I do. The one thing I never did is I'm going to tell you the truth. Like, if there's no opportunities in what you did, I would, if I was in your position, that's what I would want to hear. I don't want to hear a bunch of fluff and then find out, well, there really isn't anything, and give you false hopes. Just like having your, and what Scott first talked about, I started typing, but I got caught up in another one, where being ready for federal contracts, that's very important. That's one of the reasons they have that 2-year rule in the 8A program, because it is all about business development. And when you start off in the 8A program and you do that whole 9 years, at the end of it, we want you to be a viable small business where you can compete, because no matter what we say, that's always where it's going to end up being. And you can look at it from your perspective. And when you're at home and you get work done, do you just call the first person, or do you get word of mouth? Who does the, there's no big secret to it. When you're a contracting officer, yes, you don't give preference to people just because you know them, or if somebody performs, yes, you may want to use them again, or you may have seen their work, and you sometimes you only get one chance to get your foot into the door and do a good job. There's also government purchase cards, where small things, under, I think it's like $4,000 or $5,000.
It's actually gone up to 10,000 now.
Oh wow!
Yeah, the P card system, it has.
Yeah, and you can actually go higher than that if under certain circumstances. But so there's it's all about getting your foot into the door, getting that first opportunity. So you have to have a starting point. And that's why the SBDC, that's a great resource, because we focus a lot on the contracting certifications and on the training we're doing. Sometimes we spend like 3 or 4 hours on what we went over today. whether it in person or we do a whole separate class. You're only, you can only get so much out of it. I know that's a lot of information, but if you start off at our website, and everything that we could talk about is there too. And the website is actually really good. It'll take you through step by step for anything you're going to do, just like that SAM registration. We'll send that out and it'll go step by step. Now that may not preclude all questions, but it'll help you get there. And then when you get stuck on step number 9, that's when you want to reach out to somebody, and we can usually answer the questions because we've done it so many times.
So we're getting right at the 2:30 mark, and I want to quickly, if someone can answer these final questions. Is the State Fiscal Accountability Authority a good resource to start with?
If I can answer that, it depends. By the State Fiscal Accountability Authority, that's state purchasing, or it's the Materials Management Office. That's state level contracts. I have a number of clients who have done a ton of work at schools, elementary schools, high schools, USC, that kind of thing. And that's all state funding. And obviously the state spends a lot more money on other types of projects as well. I have people that are involved in road construction. Obviously you're getting into SCDOT's arena, state funding. But cities and counties also provide funding for roads and things that they do and for buildings that they do. So it's really a matter of, can I say, fishing? And part of what I do is I teach you how to fish. I show you how to communicate, how to look for work opportunities. And, unfortunately, part of the work opportunities are not available on the internet. They are like on what used to be called FedBizOps, now called Contracting Opportunities, and beta.sam are typically for solicitations or for awards anticipated to cost $25,000 or more. But many people would love to have a $10,000 award, so where are those? Well, there's a whole other avenue for that. And that gets again into knowing where to look and how to look, which
Scott, I think you just answered one of the next questions, because it said, can someone from SCORE, and I'm assuming that's what it means, and SCORE is a similar organization to the Small Business Development Center, help you choose a contract that best fits your business? I've always, been under the impression that you yourself as a business look at contracts that you feel like you could provide that service, versus we try and match you with what your business would fit.
Yeah, and actually that raises a point, because, and I'm sure Michael's and Angela have both run into this a number of times. You'll get people that will say, well, I'm glad to do anything. Where is there a need? They're thinking that if they can find a niche, then they'll all of a sudden become they'll make uniforms, or they'll do something and they can subcontract out the work, and they don't personally have to do anything. They can get a certification of some sort and just farm out the work. And there are performance requirements with all these certifications that they talked about. And so you need to be cognizant of that. Michael or Angela, you wanted to add something to that?
Yeah, there's a limitations on subcontracting performance requirements. So you can't just farm it all out. And I would caution that there are people out there looking to use your certifications. Mm-hmm. So be careful, and you always want to be careful, even when you're subcontracting. If you don't want to get involved with the wrong prime contractor, you want to have a good relationship, because there are stories of people not getting paid and things like that we don't need to get into, because that's a small percentage, but it does happen. So it's just like people were saying they paid certain amount of dollars to get registered in SAM or to get 8A certification or what business assistance, and we're telling you, this is all free. So you always have to be careful out there with whatever you're doing. That's just a word of caution.
Yeah. So Latrice asked a very good question, and I can try and field this. It's, how do I look for financing? Is there a requirement for the business to be one? And well, that's what Scott spoke about with the piece about the general business consultants can talk to you about developing a business plan, developing financial projections, taking all of that information that you would write and you would develop and taking that to a lending institution for a loan.
Yeah.
And so that is the step of developing your business. And then once your business is in place, then you would work with Scott or a government contracting specialist. Is that correct, Scott?
Yeah, I would add to that that the SBA does have a number of programs that can help to support small businesses that otherwise could not get the funding. That doesn't mean that they don't have to be solid businesses, but they do have guarantee programs, the 7A and what is it, 405, I think it is, and some of the others.
Or in the microloan.
In the microloan. And they also, for construction contractors, have a surety bond program, which is worth looking at too, I think. So I think before you just make a decision, oh, I don't have the money, again, I would encourage you to talk to an SBDC representative and confirm that and explore ways that you could get the money. If you're really in bad shape, your credit score is bad, and you've had bankruptcy and everything else, and you come and say, well, I want to get funding, you are going to have a hard time. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
So it is now 2:35. So I think that we're going to close this. I will, of course, have a copy of any unanswered questions, and I can send those to both Scott and Angela in case they would like to be able to respond to those outside of this. But I want to thank everyone for their participation today, and we look forward to doing this again because I like the online format because we can reach a much broader audience and we can have the expertise of Angela, Michael, Scott, and also Sherry Pittenger is on the call, and she is one of our government contracting specialists that is in the upstate of South Carolina. So thank you all for joining us today, and look for the post-event survey that will be coming out this afternoon. Respond to that, and then Monday we will be sending out the slide presentations both from Angela and from Scott, as well as any other handouts or anything that Michael mentioned. We'll send those out Monday afternoon, as well as we hope to be sending out the link to the recording so you can review this presentation again. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.